Welcome everyone. My name is Grant. I'm with Hermina Wireless. We've got a special guest today in Charles Clare, and we sort of called this webinar topic "How to Stop Students from Blaming the Wi-Fi." We're going to go through a quick little intro and a little bit of an agenda, and then I'm going to pass it over to Charles. But what I just sort of wanted to do first, just some quick housekeeping. We are using Zoom today, so I do encourage people to use the chat. We don't have a Q&A, but we do have a chat. And so, if people have got questions throughout, which I think they probably will, based on what Charles is going to talk about and to cover, and he's also a big wealth of knowledge, please put them in the chat. And I'll do my best to sort of answer them at least through the chat. Otherwise, we will raise them verbally with Charles, and he can sort of he can give some examples and verbally respond as well. So that would be really, really good. Anyway, without further ado, we might kick off on the slide side of things. So let me get to the next screen. Okay, so look, you've already heard about me. I work for Hermina. I cover the APAC region. My official title is Head of Technical Operations, although if you go on our website, you can actually look up, the staff that work at Hermina, and we've affectionately given me also the role of Kangaroo Wrangler. We like to have a little bit of fun at Hermina Wireless as well, and a little bit of tongue in cheek. And then Charles, I might pass it over to you because you've got a lot of certs. So I wasn't sure where to start there, but maybe just a quick little intro for yourself as well.
Well, actually, this morning I actually had a kangaroo in my driveway. So I live in a sort of a not bushy area, but there is a bush at the end of the road. So we did have some kangaroos in the driveway, and they do scare you when you're not ready for them.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I've been sort of being in that IT area for quite some time, but I originally hated computers, and I did an engineering degree. So there were no jobs in Australia for electronics at the time. So I did an electrical engineering degree, but I did all the electronic subjects. So that really set me up for understanding waves and all the electronics and wave theory, because I did a lot of those subjects during my engineering degree. And then when I got my first job, I went and worked for a engineering company that sold engineering software. And that's where I really found my love of computers again. So that's when I sort of got into networking, etc. So I've just mainly been working on Cisco because they were sort of the leading edge at the time when I started, and I've been getting all my certifications through that. But I also realized that you can't just be an expert in one area. Sometimes you've got to have a lot of expertise in other areas, especially with Wi-Fi, because you've got a lot of clients. So I did a lot of Microsoft certifications, Citrix certifications, and also because I'm heavily into sort of engineering, I've got a lot of the wiring, electrical certifications. I've got an electrical license, all those sorts of things. So that really set me up for really good troubleshooting. And then I found this love of Wi-Fi, and sort of now it's only in the last sort of 5 years that I've now 100% Wi-Fi.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and I'm sort of looking forward to the first couple of slides to maybe blow some minds on where some of that started. But maybe just a quick agenda, and then I'll pass it over to you, Charles. But rather than go through all of this, this is probably what we're going to more or less cover. And the focus is on the digital exams that you've sort of been a part of for a number of years now, and what went right, what went wrong, what you could learn from that. And I think that there's going to be some really great sort of stories along the way. So I might hand it over to you if you want to sort of share your content, and maybe you can sort of talk about how you got into the Wi-Fi space, because I think that there's a pretty amazing story there.
No problems. So when I first got into networking, this is the sort of networks that I was dealing with. And this is from a stockbroking company, and this is when they're really getting online for the first time. And this is running FDDI to their servers, and it was 10 meg Ethernet on repeaters out to the desktops. So this was sort of the start of networking, and when Cisco really sort of started to get into the networking area. But I was up because of my sort of engineering background, one of the areas that I was always put into was sort of mining. And in Australia, mining is a big thing up in Queensland. This is an open cut zinc mine. It's actually 3.5 kilometres across, and those little look like Tonka trucks are actually 2 and 3 stories high. They're absolutely massive. And my brief was, can you get Wi-Fi into the pit? It takes 2.5 hours to drive into the pit to get some data off a logger in one of those trucks, and then 2.5 hours to drive out again. So they wanted Wi-Fi so they could just upload it. So in those days, Cisco's had these new bridges they just brought out. So this is the first Cisco bridge, and I had set it up to do a proof of concept. I've got a Cisco bridge pointing down with a patch antenna down into the mine, and then another Cisco bridge which went 10 kilometers to a water tower, which is where we could get the network for the mine. And mind you, all of this is running on 1 megabit Wi-Fi. This is 802.11b. So that's where I started, and it's come a long way since then. Now I think that was about 1997, 98. So yeah, from now till then, I've seen huge advances in the Wi-Fi.
What sort of data rates
today to look at is, how do we do this? How do we get Wi-Fi in big venues for doing digital exams?
Hey, and Charles, what sort of data rates were you getting at that open pit mine? Like,
it was only 1 megabit, so it was really slow. But all they had to do was send up a little bit of survey data. When you look at that pit, it all looks like dirt, but there's only certain bits of it that have zinc in it. So they didn't want to be digging dirt, they only wanted to be digging zinc. So they had to make sure that they were getting up-to-date data from the surveyors of where to dig.
Right. No, that's awesome. All right.
So with digital exams, the main thing is that during COVID, a lot of the universities got a really, what would you call it? They were forced into running digital because they always thought it was on their roadmap, but they hadn't really thought how they were going to do it. But during COVID, they were forced to go digital in a big way because a lot of the students were in lockdown, and especially in Melbourne, we had one of the longest lockdowns on the planet, and we didn't see each other for a long time, and they had to do all of the teaching for schools and universities via the web. So they got huge benefits out of doing the exams over laptops and digital, and the main reason is that they can mark them really quickly, and they can also work out statistically if people are cheating or not. So one of the great benefits of doing digital was this ability to be able to get the feedback back to the students quickly so they could see where they were going wrong, and also to save money in getting, in the old days when, I don't know if you remember, you used to have to do these A, B, and C with a 2B pencil, and you had to cross it out and send it to a scanner. That costs a lot of money these days. So the doing it digitally makes it much more cost effective. But one of the things they really wanted to do was make 100% sure that the students didn't have a friend sitting at home helping them. So the only way to do that is to have it proctored, and that's where you put everybody in the same room and have people walking up and down checking that nobody's got any advantages they shouldn't have. So then you get the best of both worlds. You get the world of exam integrity, which is very important for universities, and the ability to save money doing the exams. So the main thing is to get them in one big room, because then you don't have to pay so much money to all the people who are proctoring the exam. If you have lots of rooms, then you have to have a lot of staff. Where you have a big room, you can have less staff. So the big reason and the big push at the moment is to save money and to get the exam integrity up to date. But you need a big venue, and that's the biggest problem, is you need a big venue. And you have to look around for these places, and in Australia there is one which is a very old building, and as you can see, it's you almost can't see the other end of the hall, it's so big. But this is used for exhibitions. I think there's been little weddings. It's used for all types of things. But this was a perfect opportunity, a perfect venue for exams, and it had been used for exams in the past, but they were pen and paper. which means you just needed desks and pens and paper. But now they wanted to make it Wi-Fi. How do you get Wi-Fi in a building like this? And that's the problem, getting Wi-Fi in here where this is a heritage listed building. You can't scratch the paint, and also you have to have all the health and safety types of things. So we were really looking for having Wi-Fi devices sort of hanging off these poles, and we had to make up specialized aluminium with pool noodles to make sure that we didn't scratch the paint and that it was very safe, it couldn't fall over, all those sorts of things. So
So,
that was the
Charles,
main part of the start of it.
so you had just sort of mentioned that you had to bring Wi-Fi into the venue. So I'm assuming that was there no Wi-Fi in there to start with?
Yeah, there is.
Um,
There is.
but
There's four,
but probably not at the scale that
correct.
that
There
would
are
be
four
required.
APs in. There are four APs in
Okay.
there, and those APs, for a start, are running at 100 milliwatts. So you have,
Yep.
because that's what the person who set it up thought was a good idea, to get the coverage. But they didn't realize that most of the phones are only on 10 milliwatts and they get one-way communication. So the Wi-Fi is extremely patchy and usually only made for the odd, what do you call it, like FPOS machine and something like that.
Yep.
Normally, when they do events in here, the Wi-Fi is always brought in.
Right. And you can see those pool noodles there as well. The blue and the grey, it looks like, around the framing.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
And then once you then start going to scale, there's some areas where you can't get, there's no poles, so we had to put out poles out 4 meters hanging off the balustrades to get the APs over the students. In the first design, we had Omni antennas. We were just using Cisco 9130s. And that was because at that stage, 6 gig was really at its infancy. And we wanted to use directional antennas, but to add the weight of an antenna, the bracket, and the AP was just too much for the square aluminium. So we couldn't actually do it. But Cisco then brought out the 9166D1s, which have it all in one unit, and it's still the same weight as the 9130s. It's just fractionally heavier. So that in the end turned out to be an absolutely brilliant access point for doing digital exams. So in the third and fourth exam semesters, we've been using 9166D1s, and they also do the 6 gigahertz, which is an interesting thing to see as more and more clients support it. But you can see in these pictures again all of the brackets that needed to be put up, and also you have to get this put up in a day, right? So that I think they have 8 or 9 people plus scissor lifts, etc., putting up all of the equipment and then running it all up onto the balcony. And then you've got another whole group of people of probably 30 or 40 people putting out all the desks. And it is actually quite hard to get those desks in lined up. When you've got that many desks, it's actually quite hard. So they've got laser levels, they've got string lines, because you don't want to get to the end and find you haven't got enough room and you have to move all the chairs down.
Yeah, that must have been quite chaotic then, trying to get the infrastructure in place, as well as, like, a lot of that floor space and those desks that would have also, and the chairs. That seems like that would have taken up quite a lot of space too, just getting that all deployed in a single day.
Yes, they do it in a single. They get most of it done in a day and a half, and then another half a day to get all the network actually brought up. But the main thing is we want to get the APs up before they put the chairs in, because it's very hard to get in there once the chairs are in. But you can see how nicely they get the lines, and the students are all, they get a small little desk.
Yeah.
I'll show you. Yeah, there's another thing. So last year we changed it a bit and we ran continuity wires between the APs to make it easier to run the Ethernet ports, so that we didn't have to run any continuity wires directly to the poles. They're all running off the existing brackets, which sped up the installation time a lot.
Yeah.
Because you've still got to remember, you've got to get APs to power and Ethernet to every one of these APs.
I'm guessing you would have done some sort of testing before, before you got to putting some access points in the environment, right? So how was that a bit of a process? Like what was how did you sort of get to the physical installation versus testing it to make sure that you were confident that it would work?
Then what I did originally is I set up a AP out in my back garden, and those ropes are in a 1 meter grid, and you can see the AP over on the right hand side here. Whoops.
Yep.
Grab that. Wrong one. Yeah, because you can see the AP over here on the right. So what I was basically doing is taking measurements at all these different locations and different heights of the AP to work out so that we could get small cells. The biggest problem you have with exams at this scale is you haven't got enough channels. Like in Australia, we have 22 5 gig channels, and we've got close to 70 APs. So we're going to have channel reuse. So we need to keep the cell sizes really small, and we don't want bleed. Now, what's really good with these 916061s is they've got I think it's about 60 or 70 degree antenna, but you need to make sure that you get the height right so that you get enough cell size. So when you looked at the actual coverage, you could see at 6 gig the cell was quite small, but then at 5 gig it was a lot bigger, and at 2.4 it was huge. So you have to make sure that you're adjusting the powers of the 6 gig, 5 gig, and 2.4 to keep the cell sizes the same. We tended not to use 2.4 at all because it was just too much problem. But you do get the odd student that has a really old laptop, and as part of the what would you call it? Everybody's equal. You have to support whatever they bring.
Yeah. Hey, we've got a question here as well.
Yep.
So someone is asking, what kind of stand were you using for the access point? So I think it's referring to the previous image where you were doing your AP testing. So what kind of stand is that? And can it be purchased somewhere?
No, that was a custom made. We had that custom made. We had a company called Rocket Wi-Fi who custom made those to
Well, they
fit
might have
the
been
holes.
referring to the courtyard picture, the one in your backyard.
That
Yeah.
one. That's a
Yes.
camera stand. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So I'll show you that. That's actually that particular one's a custom made one that I made. So it's a camera stand, and I've
Yeah.
welded a special bracket that goes straight into a camera mount that you can put different brackets
Yes.
on, and
Yeah.
it's quite good that you can put external antennas and all sorts of things on it. Like this was before Wi-Fi stand, so
Yes.
like these days you can go out and just buy it off
Yep.
the shelf. But in the old days, I was making these stands because no one else did them.
Yeah, well, and we were talking about that just before we went live. And so, camera stands, I have heard, generally you probably want to inspect them to make sure that you can get the right height. I've also used speaker stands in the past as well. And like you mentioned, Charles, as well, you can buy a product off the shelf, which is called Wi-Fi stand, that is built for that very purpose as well.
Because the most important thing we had to deal with is OH&S. So when we built all these, we had to make absolutely sure there was not a single way that could ever crash down. Because if you had
Yep.
students there and one of those decided to come down, it would be a major problem. That's why you can see there are two wires going up. They're bolted on. There's no way that can move.
Yep.
And they did say, what happens if the student comes along and tries to knock it like a basketball hoop? So we had to give that a try.
Yes.
Give it a
Yep.
whack, make sure that it shakes a bit. And we did have, which was quite funny, one day a dove came into the hall, and it was flying around, and it loved sitting on those little white APs watching the students doing their exams. And we were just hoping that it wasn't going to go to the toilet while it was up there and start making a mess of all the back of the APs. But that night they put in a little area for food, and they managed to catch it and take it back outside.
Yeah. We've got another question here from someone else asking about how far away did you need to place the access points to reduce possible cross-channel or co-channel interference. So I think that might have been referring to the other image from earlier.
Yeah. Then
And I guess that, I mean, you know, that's probably going to depend on the AP type, and maybe, you know, what your transmit power probably is as well.
yeah, it's more that we wanted to keep around 30 to 40 students per AP per channel.
Yep.
So, and we don't know whether they've got 6 gig or 5 gig on their laptop. So at the moment, we have to assume that all of them are on 5 gig, and that we're getting 30 to 40 there. So we're trying to keep it the cell size small enough that it covers that area, and that's why those APs are at 3 meters. We tried them at 4 meters, but they were just giving the too big a cell size. And if I bring up like what the design looks like, the cells, in fact, the cell sizes are quite small. And we're trying to keep the co-channel interference away from each other. So when you are designing this, you keep the channels you're using on this side, you then reuse on this side, because this is actually nearly 200 meters apart from end to end. It's actually quite big. If I bring up the channel plan, too many.
Speaking of the channel plan as well, we've got another question about if you use RRM or if you use static static channels.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. So this is the channel plan out of Hamina. So you see up here on the first, I can do a highlighter here, highlighter, laser pointer. Yeah, so you see here that you've got the 2.4 gig, the 5 gig, and the 6 gig channels, and underneath it's showing the capacity. So what we do is we put the APs in this grid to get the number of APs, a number of students under the AP, but we're also limited to where the actual posts are in the room. So they tend to line up with the posts. But what we found is that RRM will make very silly decisions, because RRM is based on the APs it can see near it. And the RRM from this AP to this AP, it'll think, oh, I can turn the power down and make the cell size even smaller. So basically RRM, you just can't use it in this type of environment. And also you can't have the channels changing as the exam is going. And you don't want the environment to change between days either, because you don't want it to work one day and not work the next. So all of this has been done with the channel planner. So what we do is we go into the channel planner and tell it that we're only going to use 1, 6, and 11. These are the 5 gig channels that we use. Now we don't use channel 149, and I'll get onto that why in a minute. And we don't use the channel 144. And then in 6 gig in Australia, we only get Uni 5. So we can only use these 6 gig channels. And again, because we don't have very many, we're only making them 20 megahertz wide.
Yep.
Now, Hamina then makes up the optimum channel plan for the area. But of course, it can't be 100% optimum, because there is going to be channel reuse, but we're trying to get that channel reuse as far away from each other as possible, because we've got the directional antennas. But you know that students have omni antennas in their laptops, so there is some some bleed. But this is what you see on an actual exam when it's running. So this is the sort of data that you're seeing on all the 5 gig channels when it's running. So we're generally using all the channels, but you can see that we have got some APs that are on the same channel. Now this is taken in the middle of the building so that we can see the entire network. But when you're at one end or the other, you tend not to be able to see the other channels. Even from the spectrum analyzers, it can't see them because they're just too far away. But we do all the monitoring from the center because we want to see what the entire spectrum looks like. And as you can see, we're not using this channel 144 and we're not using this channel 149, but as you can see, even though we're not using it, it is still incredibly busy. And this was one of the findings that we got when we did some small scale. We couldn't work out why channel 149 was always so busy. And the reason for that, and here it is again, is that the Macs use it. In Australia, in the AU region, I think it also in whole of Asia Pac, but I think in America it's a different channel. But in Australia, they use channel 149 for the Macs to talk to each other, for AirPlay, for
AirDrop,
all those sorts of
yep,
things. Now,
yeah,
we tried to get the students, can you please turn it off when you come to the exam? It was a complete non-event.
yep,
Basically, you cannot get students to do anything to their computer. Even if you send them an email, they will not do it.
yep,
Most of the students don't even know how to turn off their mobile phone. Like they know how to put it on silent, but they don't know how to turn it off, because it's a different genre of them just being, it's digital life for them, that it's always on. So yeah,
yep,
this particular channel we don't use, because when you have a room full of Macs, and it really depended on the subject. I think this was law. A lot of people have Macs in the law area, and also a lot of people have Macs in some of the arts degrees as well. Whereas we found with mathematics and science, they were mainly PCs. And when it was architecture, it was really high-end gaming laptops, because they need the GPUs, etc. So it was really interesting to see the different types of devices that came in depending on the subject. So we didn't use that channel purely because it was just too busy saying, do you want to airdrop to me? 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 And I
yep,
would have loved to have tried it, but you could have gone airdrop and seen 2,000 options come up of who you're going to airdrop to.
yeah. Yeah, and so this might play into another question someone has asked. Does dual 5 GHz radios with 20 megahertz channel, would that have helped such a crowded area? Which I think you've kind of answered, but I think it's probably good just to get your sort of take on why or
Yeah.
why not that, would not be ideal.
Yeah, we did try it initially. With the 9130 eyes, you do have the ability to do dual 5 gig. You got the micro and macro cells. But we did use it on the first exam. But what we found is that the macro cell had about 30 users on it, and the micro cell only had maybe 1 or 2 users. And they were generally the ones directly below it. And that was all that would pick up, because all the other ones would say, oh, the macro's better than the micro, so I'll go to that, even though there were more clients on it, because they could hear it louder. Because you've got to remember, it's always the client that makes the choice, and we don't necessarily get the ability to tell them where to go. Now, what we have found, though, with the 9166D1s, they have macro, which means that you then get the same power on both radios, and then it does work. So if you're using the macro micro, it doesn't work. If you're using the macro, it does work. But again, we don't have the channels to be able to run it anymore. So what we've done in the 9166D1s, instead of running dual 5, we run 5 and 6, because you can't have, if you turn off one of the 5, turn on the 6 gig radio, you have to turn off one of the 5s.
Right. Yep.
So we decided that it was better to have the 6 gig running, because then we get them off the spectrum completely. And that's actually better. And we were actually seeing, in the last exams that we did, we tried to keep some of the statistics. So this is a list of how many clients that were connecting at 6 gig in an exam. So you had 19%, 22%. On average, it was about 20%. So 20% of the clients were connecting at 6 gig. And I'm expecting this year to see, I reckon it's going to go to 30, because it's like a new year. There's a new set of students. They've bought new laptops. They're starting uni for the first time. They've just finished high school. Like, it's going to be a higher degree. And a lot of them are now buying Macs. Mac is becoming the more, if they don't know what laptop to buy, they buy a Mac. And those come standard with 6 gig these days generally. So hopefully we'll see more 6 gig, because the more 6 gig we see, the less reliance we have on the 5 gig, which is definitely overloaded at the moment. But one of the good things we really did see was most of the clients are connecting at WPA3.
Yeah.
So we are going to make
Um,
a decision at some point to mandate that.
yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Look, look, those statistics look really, really good, and very, very healthy. Sort of what I would probably expect, in general, but it's good, for 6 gigahertz client support. There was someone asking how you captured these statistics. So it looks like you've managed to pull them from out of DNAC.
Yeah, so DNAC, no, those ones actually aren't out of DNAC. They're actually out of the controller. DNAC actually doesn't give them to you to that degree. In the
Right.
controller, there is a option to show 6 gig capable clients, and then you can say whether they're on 6 gig. So we
Yeah.
actually had two columns, and I've only got one column here, but one column was they're 6 gig capable, and the other column was they actually connected at 6 gig. And what we were seeing is all of the fleet devices, and they're the devices that we have sort of on trolleys in case a student has a problem with their laptop. We just take the laptop off and give them a new machine, and they
Yeah.
continue the exam because there's no time and there's no extra time given for them to muck around with their computer. And what we found is that all of those fleet devices, and if I bring this one up here, had this little section. All the fleet devices had preferred band set to 6 gig. Now,
Yeah.
that's a Windows thing. In Mac and Macs, they do it by default, which is really good. But
Yeah.
what we found with the clients, the students, is they don't have this set. So we did find some clients would still go to 5 gig because it was stronger signal. And that was
Right.
where we were getting those figures in here. We were seeing on average 5% was still connecting on 5 gig, even though they were 6 gig capable. So
Yeah.
we're going to try and communicate to students to turn that setting on their PCs, but the Macs do it by default. But 5% is not a lot, so it's not a big problem. But it would be
Yeah.
nice to have more on 6 gig because we've got the channels and we've got the capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, and a couple of other questions have come in. So one was asking how you configured for 6 gig WPA3 transition mode. It looks like they've tried to configure it before, but some of the MacBooks were not able to access Wi-Fi. So I'm not sure
Yes.
how long that may take to answer in exact specifics.
Yeah, this is one of the problems with, I suppose, the way the industry is pushing it is they want people to get off WPA2,
Yeah,
and the industry has said, well, people aren't moving. WPA2 has been around for 12 years. We're going to force WPA3 on the newer technology. So to go to 6 gig, we need WPA3. So we have transition mode running on the clients, which means they can run WPA2 or WPA3. And that means that they get the choice. Now, we didn't have any problems with students or laptops connecting at WPA3, but we did need to be on a particular version of software, which was 17.12.3. Before
17.12.3.
17.12.3, we had all sorts of issues.
Right.
So I think it's more of a Cisco thing rather than a client thing.
Yep.
And since we've been on 17.12.3, it's been super reliable, and we're scared to change now. and that's the problem. With the exams coming up this year, we're going to put all the APs on a dedicated controller, and we bought the new Cisco latest and greatest, but it wants 17.15.3, I think, as its minimum, and we're too scared to go to it because it's bleeding edge, and we can't test it at scale unless it's the day of the exam.
Yeah.
So that's why we want to get that rolled out at the university totally, so that then we know that it works. So we want it so that the exam venue is identical to the university, so that we
Yep.
know there are no issues. There's not going to be some weird left case thing, because the thing with exams is nothing can go wrong. And this is probably one of the most stressful things about digital exams, is they are timed, they are timetabled. They're back to back. One exam starts, the next one finishes, the next one starts, the next one finishes. Nothing can go wrong. They can't reschedule them.
Yep.
Students have sometimes booked trips to leave the country, 3 hours after they finish their exam, they're going on holiday. That they can't have things go wrong. So
Yep.
Wi-Fi is one of those things where you have some things sometimes they don't work. With this, we need 100% success rate, and that's probably the most stressful thing about it. And that's why we have so many fleet laptops. So we have
Yeah.
about 300 fleet laptops. I'll show you a photo of that one. So we have all these fleet laptops, which are set up ready to go. So if a student has any problem, we just swap it out. Now, one of the really good things about this exam software is it saves as they're going. So if for some reason their whole laptop locks up, runs out of battery, something goes wrong, then we just swap out the laptop, they log in and they continue where they left off. But that also then means that the Wi-Fi is very busy because every keystroke they're typing is going up to the cloud, up to the cloud, up to the cloud, up to the cloud. And that's one of the problems we had right at the beginning on the first exam, is the exam software itself in the cloud was not ready to have 2,500 laptops all connect all at the same time. And it was sitting in Azure land going, oh, got too much load, fire up another server. Oh, too much load, fire up another server. Anyway, it took probably 20 minutes before it had fired up enough servers to deal with it. But now we're aware of that. We tell them, have the servers pre-fired up before the start of the exam.
Right. Yeah. That probably ties in with another question that's come through, and I appreciate the audience for asking them. These are really good. So someone's also asked about how you planned for hardware failure, particularly the access points. So you've sort of talked about the student device laptop side of it, but I guess with the capacity being so critical, like what happens if there is like a hardware failure on the infrastructure side?
Yeah, so it's designed in such a way. I'm just trying to find a photo of the rack. Is that one? That one. That's probably not quite it. But so upstairs, there's two switches in a pair.
Yeah.
And they're got redundant power. One power on UPS, one power on normal power. So we can have a total failure of the power, and we can run till the end of the exam. Because most of the laptops have power, and as long as we have power to keep the Wi-Fi up, we can continue to run the exam. It might be a bit dark, but they can continue. The other thing is that we put the APs in even odd on different switches, so that if we did lose a whole switch stack, we only lose half the APs, and the other APs do have enough coverage to take up the load, but within that time we would have run upstairs and repatched every AP from the switch that failed into the switch that's still running, to bring them back up again.
Right.
We also have dual fibers from both switches. And that's probably the important thing here, is the fiber is the most delicate thing in this whole thing. And that's why we keep it off the ground, because they're running trolleys, and you've got to really look after the fiber, because if the fiber goes, that's the end of your network. So there's dual fibers to every switch, and this is the sort of lengths you go to for that fiber. So it's in a conduit, it comes down, it's got things over it. The fiber actually goes into the floor and then runs out to an area where we have the fiber that comes into the building. So yeah, in terms of redundancy, everything is redundant. The only thing that I suppose isn't redundant is that we have the APs don't have two APs next to each other, but there is enough coverage from each AP to take the load if they did fail. What we have had, though, if things that have gone wrong, is we've had the mobile network go out. I don't know if you remember, but there was there
was an Optus outage.
Yeah, the biggest outage in history with Optus. I think it was 10 million clients went out, and Optus somehow managed to lock themselves out of their own routers. And it was everything. It wasn't only the 4G. It was internet, telephone services, everything. And we had an exam that day. Luckily we weren't using Optus for the internet, but the big problem is we use all the students have to do two-factor authentication. For their to start their exam, to prove it's them. So they needed to have their mobile working. Now we tend to not let the students have their Wi-Fi on their phones. because that just takes more connections. And their phones, generally, when they're under their table and they've left them on, are syncing all their photos, getting the latest feeds from Instagram, etc. We just do not want that traffic on the Wi-Fi. So we generally tell them, you do your two-factor, you turn it off. So we had to let them all on the Wi-Fi, and it actually worked. So they were able to. Then we did allow, I think it was extra 10 minutes for them to do the authentication because it took a bit longer. But in the end of it worked. But what was very interesting another day is we had a fire alarm go off in the middle of an exam, and this is the graph from that fire alarm. So you can see they all came in. This graph is 1,000 students, so there's 1,000 here. So this was just under probably 1,500 students. So you can see they come in, they've got all their phones turned on, they turn them off, and then they settle. And then the fire alarm went off, everybody had to leave. Now, what was interesting is they weren't supposed to take their devices.
Yeah.
Right? But a lot of them did, as you can see. And then it was realized that it was just a bit of dust on a sensor, and it wasn't bad. So they all came back in. They continued the exam. Now, they couldn't sort of give them more time for the exam or anything like that because they've got another exam back to back. So they just got compensation for that lost time. But as you can see, when the exam ends, they're not supposed to turn their phone on until they leave the room, but you can see the phones definitely go on, and then they leave. So that is the big thing with exams, is these phones. This is probably the biggest problem, is dealing with phones. And even the areas where they're doing paper exams, so there are some areas where they just do paper exams, you have to have Wi-Fi there to suck the phones. Otherwise, they connect to your digital infrastructure. So in this particular instance, we put a couple of APs just pointing at the paper exam area so that their phones wouldn't connect over to the digital exam area.
Yeah, right.
But the main thing is you do your testing. So this is where because you've got these fleet devices, you can do some testing. So we have a script that simulates 100 students doing an exam. So we lay them all out on the desks, and then these just do the exams over and over again. And what we do is we just check the Wi-Fi throughput, and what we actually do, we make worst case scenarios. We turn off APs around the area to make sure that the failover would work, all those sorts of things. But we've done it now 4 times, so we're pretty confident about it working now. But every time we make any change, we've really got to think about the consequences, because you can't have something silly come up that you didn't think about. But we did try, because it was such a pain to put all those laptops out on the desks. We did try to run the test like that, all on the trolley, but it doesn't work. The antennas are just too close to each other, and you just got really, really poor performance. So you're just having staff available to log in the laptops, type in the password, start the software. It all just takes time.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we did with the testing, and this is probably the interesting part, is we do a wireless survey at the end of the test. This was the first time we did the 9166D1s. And so this was this is the wiring. We've changed the AP model now. What are we going to introduce? So this is a survey that we did with the 9166D1s. And we noticed that the coverage was very holy. Like, there was little lower areas, which means that students go on lower data rates. We have a minimum data rate of 24 megabits per second. And we try to keep the data rates high so that they get on and off the air quickly. But with this, we noticed that they were going to get really poor data rates in some of these areas, because this is at almost getting to minus 67, minus 68. And as you can see, we had all the 6 gig channels being used in Australia, which it's very rare that you get to see something on every single channel.
Yeah.
But what the thing was in here is that we didn't realize is that even though we're focusing the energy
signal
in one direction, you think that you need to turn the power down, but these antennas are actually a bit lossy.
Right.
So we actually needed to turn it up. So doing this survey, I originally thought, why are we getting these low signals? So it was really good then to be able to then turn it up and then do another survey and find that, yep, that fixed the problem. And this is where the Hamina software comes in really handy. Is it's got this really nice thing, which is this real-time view. And you can, as you walk around, you can see the primary and secondary signal strength. So this is on 6 gig. You can see that we've got a primary and we've got a secondary. And we've got them at about, they're almost the same, which means that if we do have a failover, we lost a whole switch, then we're still going to have capacity. And we can test that by walking up and down the aisle.
Yeah.
And even when you're documenting, you can look at the you can walk up and down the aisle and get the signal strength at every single desk, so that you know that every single student's going to have a good performance. The hardest part is putting the data into Cisco. So this is where we generate all the AP names, and then I put all the channel numbers that came out of Hamina into the spreadsheet, and all the power levels, because I don't know if people know, but one of the real annoyances with Cisco is that the power levels are different depending on the band. So if you have say you want 9 dBi in Uni 1, it's power level 3, but in Uni 2, it's power level 5, and in Uni 3, it's power level 5. So this is where I've got a little script which works out the power levels to so that they all become equal. And then this script that we had here then generates this code, which you then paste into the AP. So you need these 10 or 11 lines of code just to set the channels and powers on one AP. So it means that if you do it programmatically, you can't make mistakes. Doing it by hand can become a real problem. And then the why can't I get? Oh, okay, I can turn that off. And then the good thing about having it all in DNAC is you can then run a little pretty map that shows that you've got all the power levels right, because it will report them in dBm, even though you set them as numbers, that it reports them in dBm.
Yeah, nice. And so was that? And so it looks like you didn't have all the power the same across the board. Is that?
No, we're trying to keep them all at around 10 dBm, so 10 milliwatts.
Yeah, okay.
So all of them are 10 milliwatts, but it's impossible to do with Cisco because some channels are 11, some are at 9, depending if it's on Uni 1, Uni 2, Uni 3. Now, normally people don't notice this because when they're running RRM, it just takes care of it. But because we're not running RRM, it makes it very tricky to set the channels, and this is one of the difficulties. I'd really love Cisco to have an option where you can just choose the power in milliwatts.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky.
But again, it's all about this. No one tool is useful. Like I had all the tools. So I had NetAlley, Ekahau, and Hamina. There's no one tool does it all at the moment. So everything you need everything to be able to keep an eye on the exams. And I even had my my new purchase, which is a Arona spectrum analyzer, and that really showed all the Bluetooth. You don't realize how much Bluetooth there is from the mice. There are so many mice the kids bring in. The Bluetooth just obliterates the 2.4 gig from all the mice. But you don't see that with a lot of the Wi-Fi spectrum analyzers because they're not fast enough.
Yeah, I can imagine if you've got like what's the student count in that in the room, in the auditorium? It's
it's around 3. And when we did it, this was the design. This was for 2,000 clients. Yeah. But this year they're going to this, so we're going for 3,000. So it's going to be the whole thing. And what they really want is they want every seat digital, so then they don't have timetabling issues, because it's
Yeah.
very hard when some of the seats are paper and some of them are digital. They've got to work out, oh, I've got to put the digital ones over here and the paper ones over here, and the timetabling software doesn't have a little tick box to say digital. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so when they make them all digital, then they can put any exam anywhere and it works.
And it's pretty impressive. And I mean, what does you talked about like the setup, right? You had like a day and a half. What does the pack down look like? Do you have to be out of out of there in the same amount of time? Like, how does that all sort of
Yeah,
look?
they want it out there as quick as possible because every day in that venue costs a lot of money.
Right.
So yeah,
Okay.
so the first thing they do is they have, they just throw bodies at it. They just have, probably 30 or 40 people collecting all the chairs. So over a week, you see all of the exams running, and then right at the end, which is I think it's within an hour of the last exam, takedown straight away.
Yep.
All the chairs go out, the network comes down, all the gear gets pulled out, all the APs come down. They do it. They probably do it within half a day. The taking down is much easier than putting up.
Yep.
But we need an extra half a day to a day when they're putting up to do the testing, to do the surveys, to make sure all the APs are operational. You got to remember, all these APs have been in road cases, they've been in trucks, they've been vibrating.
Yep.
Anything could have gone wrong with any of these devices. So we really need to make sure that it's 100% right. Now, if we did have
Yep.
one AP fail during an exam, we'd probably do nothing. And then we have an hour between exams, we'd get a set of stairs and swap out the AP and
Yep.
reprogram it within the time.
Yeah. So you say that your networking infrastructure is in road cases and whatnot. Is that purchased and bought in especially for the exams, or is that does that go and sit in a dark and dusty room for a year until the exams roll out this year? Or like how does that work?
It does. It goes back into road case. It's pulled out twice a year for 3 weeks a year.
Yep.
For this, but there's going to be a push for more proctored digital exams for mid-semester tests, etc. So it's going to be used more and more and more. Because of the success that they've had in the last 2 years, they've now realised that this is the way to go. And a lot of students don't want to do paper. They've asked the students, "Do you want to go back to paper?" And they go, "No," because they really like the digital. They can type faster. They're used to that laptop. They're used to that keyboard, whatever. And I suppose the big thing is the BYD part of it. Like there was a point where they thought, oh, why don't we put laptops on every desk?
Yep.
But this is what we see with BYD. So as soon as the student opens up their laptop, this is the traffic we see. MS update, Google services. For the first 10 minutes of their laptop being open, the network is absolutely hammered with all of these things updating. And this is where reading time is really good, because during reading time, they're not allowed to use their computer. So all of this is syncing in the background. They haven't started the exam. So it actually works out really well. There was talk that they don't need the reading time, but we said, no, keep the reading time. It helps.
Yeah.
It helps because with BYD OD, you can't stop this. And if you did, we could go in there into the firewall and block all this stuff. But all that will do is lock up their computer. Their computer will freeze. Things will. The experience on their computer won't work, and that's the problem. Whereas you've got fleet devices, you can, program them to not need all this stuff. But with BYD, you can't.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible looking at all those update services. It's truly everything's just always connected and always online these days.
Because when you look at it in terms of data, this is the data. So you can see when it starts, like this is when they first turn on. That's the peak of the data usage right at the start, right? Where all the services are running, and you can see that most of it is what Microsoft Windows Update service is. 10% of the usage.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that we haven't really talked about is all of these students, because the exams can go for 3 hours, they want power because some of their exam laptops can't last the 3 hours. So
Yep.
initially they did it with extension cords and power boards, but this was becoming an OH&S nightmare. And also students would unplug the wrong plug and it became a bit of a problem. So the next year they got special cables made up that have the special Australian plug. And a lot of the students call them skippy plugs, but
Yep.
they
Yeah.
and even just putting that white there was done on purpose because the students were having trouble knowing which way around to plug it in when they were all black. But having the white
Yep.
there makes it very clear which way it goes round. But this made it
Yep.
very easy then to run the power. When you have a computer plugged into power with super fast Wi-Fi, what's the first thing it wants to do? Update everything.
Update. Yep.
Right? So that's one of the problems.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Well, look, we're sort of getting to the top of the hour. I guess, was there any other last sort of points that you wanted to sort of hit on, or maybe the audience may have any sort of last questions before we start to wrap
There's probably
things
only
up?
one, and that's the one that you don't think of, and this is one we didn't think of, is the bags. Students have devices in their bags, and they
Yep.
leave them in their bags, and they leave them turned on, and they connect
Yep.
to the Wi-Fi. So we had to
Yep.
put special APs in the bag areas to honeypot those connections away. And we
Yeah.
also put if we couldn't do that, which we couldn't at this venue, they put in steel containers so that the Wi-Fi can't get out. Those doors get shut at the start of the exam, and the Wi-Fi can't get out.
Yeah.
But these are the sort of things that you don't realize. We couldn't work out why this back AP initially had nearly 100 connections because all the bags were in here on the wall.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, these are things you learn after you do it. And the good thing is we did it slowly. Like that first time they did it, we did it with 500 seats. Then we did it with 1,000. Then we did it with 1,500. This semester we're doing it with 2,000. Next semester we're doing it with 3,000. So we're learning and finding out all the anomalies because as you go bigger and bigger, other things pop up.
Yep. Yeah. And maybe the last question that someone's just popped in the chat: how many SSIDs were run up for the for the exam area, and maybe even like the honeypot that you sort of just mentioned?
We only run 2. So there's the main university SSID, and that's the one that has the WPA3, WPA2, and the 6 gig on it. And then we also run EduRoam because some students may be doing an exam from another university or whatever. They need to have EduRoam. So we have two running. But EduRoam doesn't have the 6 gig capability because it only runs WPA2 to keep compatible. They're just at the moment there's just too much issue with running EduRoam on WPA3. So we need it to be they walk in, they connect. You just can't do things like put up an SSID on a screen and say, here's the SSID called exam, here's the password, and everybody types it in. You don't have the time. The Wi-Fi has to they just open it and it works. So they're using the same username and password as they use. It's all 802.1x. And the other good thing is that all their traffic is then monitored. We know who the user is and we can see all their traffic. So if we ever get, we don't know if this student was doing something wrong, we can then go in and have a look and we can see all their traffic.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. All right, well, look, we might sort of wrap it up there. We are a couple of minutes out from the top of the hour. Charles, I guess, look, there's been a bunch of questions on here. There was some that did sort of circle back around the statistics and stuff. So I guess, how could people reach you if they sort of wanted to do so?
And I'm mainly on LinkedIn these days, but
Yep.
yeah, they're the two ways to easily
Charles
get hold of
Clare.
me.
All right, awesome. All right, great. And look, I guess, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm also on LinkedIn as well. Otherwise, grant@hermina.com. Jump on hermina.com if you want to sort of learn anything more about some of the tools that Charles was talking about today. Look, really appreciate you jumping on this webinar and sort of talking through this. I think we had a pretty engaged audience. There was a lot of questions, which was great. Hopefully we'll run another one pretty soon.
Yep. But the main thing is test.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thanks, Charles. We'll end it there, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, bye everyone.